Hi, I'm Ashley Adamson, and welcome back to another episode of Tea Time. So, today we're going to talk about feeling pretty. It's something that I've been thinking about a lot this week, and I've had kind of like a whole rebirth process of my relationship with what being pretty is, and wanted to share some of these tips with you as a later stage trans person, because this is something that I think a lot of trans women struggle with, and a lot of women honestly struggle with this too. So we're going to dive into that today. We're going to cover a few personal stories and talk about some techniques and ways that you can change your relationship to yourself in a way that can really give you more confidence and give you a better feeling of how you can treat yourself, which I think is probably the most important thing. Because, I mean, like, let's be honest, if you're really pretty and you just rely off of other people telling you pretty, then your external relationship and reliance on that is kind of like it's a time bomb. Eventually, someone is not going to validate you because of aging, or because someone may say that you're ugly or what have you. You constantly need to seek that validation. So yeah, it's nice to be validated. We should all get validated, but we need to also decouple our relationship with being validated, especially through social media, because it's a double-edged sword. You know, like, you get the validation, you feel good, but if you don't get the validation, you don't feel good. And what I see with a lot of people that use social media to feel good, they become hooked on it because that's their only source of validation, and they need to continue getting that validation because that kind of validation is temporary. It's fleeting. You know, like those moments where you go, oh, like, I want to pick up the phone and I want to click on something, or I want to communicate with someone. I just want to feel that connection and feel like I'm a valid person or what have you. Side note, I wear pink all the time now, and it's great. And I also realize I wear this sweatshirt all the time. And yeah, I don't dress up for these things, and I'm really thinking I should. I did get a haircut though, so there you go. So I am making some effort as to looking better, which is funny because we're talking about being pretty today. But hey, I mean, like, that's the thing is pretty is not necessarily just how you look, it's how you look to yourself. And that's the one of the struggles that we have as trans women with the mirror. Like, how's your relationship with your mirror doing these days? Where are you kind of like falling down, so to speak, and where are you kind of feeling like you're pulling yourself up and making yourself happier? Love to hear from you. So let me tell you a little bit about my background in my relationship with feeling pretty. So I've always wanted to feel pretty, but I never felt like I could do that when I thought I was a cis man. And it was only until I acknowledged that I could be a woman that I started to desire to be pretty. The only thing is once you make that switch in desiring to be pretty, you're now relying on some level of appearance to be the thing that validates you. And the way that we're taught that someone is pretty is they need to be validated by something to make them pretty. So society has to say you're pretty. You have to get those Instagram likes. You have to have people that compliment you, attractive people that look at you and go, oh, you're pretty. And so what we do to ourselves, and then here comes the internal work, is we emulate this external person within our head when we look at ourselves in the mirror. Do you know what I mean? Like, do you do that when you look in the mirror? Do you do this thing where you look at yourself and you go, let me judge myself as if I am looking at myself as someone else? And that someone else is the tricky part, because who is that someone else? That someone else is you, but it's you with a different shade of glasses on. Maybe you that's a little bit more critiquey and a little bit more perfectionist and a little bit more like you're just not valid enough. And that's the insecurity that we can start to grow and seed into our consciousness that then becomes its own internal dialogue and exists when we look in the mirror, and then perpetuates other stories in our life when things go wrong, whether like if we get ghosted on a date, or someone says we don't look good, or someone says we don't pass. That story can continue to spin up. For me, this kind of started to spin up once I acknowledged that I could be pretty, because it's that double-edged sword. Once you gain access to, now I can give myself the ability to feel pretty. It also means you give yourself the ability to not feel pretty. And that's something that I avoided when I thought I was a man, because I'd look in the mirror and go, well, like I'm a man, I'm not supposed to look pretty, I want to look masculine. And now that I'm a woman, I want to look pretty, but now I feel not pretty. And so now I have to solve this new problem that I've created for myself. And that's a funny thing, because if you're a cis woman and you're brought up in society, that's kind of ingrained in you at a very, very early age. But if you're a trans woman, it means that at a later age, wherever you're at, you can make that, you can make that assessment on what you think is pretty and what you think is not. Sometimes there are further deeper ingrained patterns, and that's also something we should just touch on lightly. It's a whole subject, but where do I start here? So I've just covered one thing, which is that relationship in the mirror and that voice perspective that we create for ourselves that critiques us. That one is hard to work with at first, because you try to talk back or try to convince it not to, but it says, oh, I'm being realistic or something like that. So the simplest trick to fixing that one is to create a note, a little message that says, I am beautiful, and you put that on the mirror, and you repeat that to yourself, and you look in the mirror and you assert that feeling. Text messages. Assert that feeling. And this is thanks to a friend of mine that does this, who's also trans. You just put that on the mirror, and every time you look at the mirror, you just repeat this to yourself, because you have that affirmation, and make it a pretty thing to you. Put some diamonds, put some flowers, put some sparkles, whatever. Just make something that makes you feel beautiful. And it's so simple, because it can overwrite your mind. It reminds you to think positively. And I've been using that this past week, and it's really been helpful, even though I've gotten through a lot of this. The other thing is this relationship between you and society and what you think is beautiful. Now, this one's complicated, but to kind of pull it into its bare essence, what you have to kind of look at here is what you believe validates beauty and being pretty. What I mean by this is you have an internalized belief of what can be seen as beautiful or pretty. If you feel and you believe, and I think a lot of cis women and trans women believe this, that someone has to validate you in order for you to be pretty. Someone has to see you as pretty before you can be pretty, then you're not going to be able to cross the threshold of seeing yourself as pretty, because you're always going to rely on that external source. And we've touched on this a little earlier. So what do? Well, we have to change our belief system. And this is a really interesting topic as it relates to men and women, is men have a societal belief, and I'm just going to generalize this, that the patriarchy, they are the arbitrators of what is beautiful and what is not. And they are the ones that give the compliment, and the woman should receive it and kind of be flattered by it. And so women are kind of left in the state of, typically in a state of insecurity, where it is a man or someone who compliments them that gives them that security in their own attractiveness. And this makes sense in a way when you think about societies where men want to like control the beauty of women. Like you look at an extreme of this and you see like Islam, and you see women who have the hijabs and they like cover their entire face because they're not meant to be seen by other men. But in a more Western society world, that plays out in a more subtle way where women are taught to not see themselves as pretty, but to make themselves pretty for someone else to tell them that they're pretty. And so what you just need to do is you just need to snip that relationship right there, where you don't look at other people to recognize you as pretty. You recognize yourself as pretty, and you take that power back. That's the key, is recognizing that that relationship of like what is pretty is designed to make you feel not pretty and make you feel invalid, and that insecurity gives men the opportunity to kind of manipulate your sense of attractiveness and feel attracted to someone who does see you as pretty and who does validate you, which, to be honest, I like being seen as pretty. I like being seen as pretty by someone, and I like compliments. I like flattery. But my deep-seated belief in thinking that only someone else can validate me, because, I mean, like, God, if I just see myself as pretty and I say, you're pretty, and that's it, like, now I've kind of broken the chain of control. And that's the magic piece. Can you believe that you're beautiful and that you're pretty? And look at yourself in the mirror and say that and believe that. And if you don't believe it, then why don't you believe it? I think the answer is, if you don't believe it, it's because you say, well, I'm just saying that to myself and I need someone else to say that to me, because that's how I get validated in my beauty and how I look. And there is the thing we need to snip, that belief that someone else has to validate you as pretty and beautiful. Do you get it? Does that make sense? That is the little snip. That's the little way of how we can undo ourselves in our relationship to what is pretty. And like, you know, it's not something that pans out perfectly where you just kind of give it a cut and then things change. I look at myself and I go, meh, you know, I'm looking at myself right now and I'm like, yeah, I mean, like I look like I look like, but I have these deeper ingrained experiences of seeing myself as a man. And so I also don't see myself fully as like a passing woman sometimes. But you know what? This past week, I sure as damn hell have had a much better relationship with myself in the mirror. And that has given me a reclaiming of power. It's giving me the benefit of feeling like I can hold my own space and not feel like I need to seek out anything or anyone to create my own validity in who I am. So I hope that's helpful for you. And let me know in the comments below how things are going. And yeah, I'll see you in another episode. Bye.